The speech will last about 10 to 12 minutes. Dr. Jing chose a very challenging speech, Cash a Check by Dr. Martin Luther King. He will recite a portion of Dr. King's speech with special attention to vocal variety, delivery, and other devices.
I'm sorry. Yes.
It's okay. A to D. A to D.
Thank you.
I am happy here with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been sealed in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a glorious daybreak to end the long night of captivity. But 100 years later, we must face the tragic fact that the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the menaces of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperities. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land. So, we have come here today to dramatize an appalling condition. In a sense, we have come to our nation's capital to cash a check. To cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fulfill. This note was a promise that all men would be guaranteed the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. Which has come back and marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vault of opportunity of this nation. So, we have come to cash this check. We come to cash this check today. A check that will give us, upon demand, the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind Americans of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to rise from the dark and the desolate valley of segregation to the sunlight path of racial justice. Now is the time to open the doors for opportunity to all of God's children. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. It will be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment and to underestimate the determination of the Negro. This sweltering summer of Negroes' legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963, today, this year, is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwind of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the one threshold which lead into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deed. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred.